A few years ago, while searching on the internet for paranormal or creepy games, I came across an obscure Japanese PlayStation game. It was called LSD Dream Emulator. Despite the game releasing in extremely limited numbers, many ROM sites had it available for download. Naturally, I downloaded it, converted it, and started playing. Unfortunately, the ISO was corrupted, or incorrectly ripped, as I couldn't get any further than the title screen, and when I did, all I saw was a mess of color and heard a strange fuzzing sound, like radio static. I tried re-downloading the ISO multiple times, trying it from different websites, but every single one was the same. Strange colors, fuzzy static sound. I tried posting questions on various gaming sites, but hardly anyone had heard of the game, and even less had played it. I learned that the game had a cult following, both here and in Japan. I eventually found a small Yahoo fan group dedicated to the game. I posted a question asking if anyone had managed to get the game working on Emulator, and a few days later I received an answer. Hi, I was one of the members of the ripping group who released the LSD rip. We managed to successfully rip the game, but we have never managed to get it working on emulators, only the original hardware. By this point, I had practically given up on it. I didn't have a PlayStation console, and my attention span was short, and I had long since moved on to other things, like Eversion or Yuminiki. Then, earlier this year, the LSD was released on the Japanese PlayStation Network. I remembered how much I had tried to play it, even browsing eBay a few times, in the vague hope that a cheap copy surfaced. So I made an account, bought a GPM PlayStation Network card, and purchased the game. And after downloading and installing the game, I began playing. The PlayStation logo came up as usual, but with the Japanese version instead, because it was a Japanese game. There was no copyright screen, but they had removed it from several other games as well. The intro video started playing after that. Different colored words bounced across the screen, spelling out, linking the sapient dream multiple times. Apparently this is what LSD stood for. The intro video started playing on and on after that. I pressed the circle button, and the game went to the title screen. There was no press start screen. It just went straight to the screen 5 or 4 times. Start, save, load, options, above start. There was a line of text telling you what day you were on. It displayed a day 1. I chose start. One thing I had learned from the Yahoo group was that the first day always started in a Japanese house with 3 floors. The contents of the house were random. The entire game was in a first-person view. I walked along the hallway I started in and walked to a bookcase, and the screen faded to white. That's the strange thing about this game. You can interact with anything. Walking into anything moves you into an area, which the game calls linking. The white faded away, and I was in a field. I couldn't see very far into the distance because every area had fog a few feet ahead of you. The graphics were also basic, almost having no texture to them. I walked onwards, eventually bumping into a tree, which sent me to another area. This time, things had gotten a bit more sinister. I was in a dark city, standing on a metal pier. A boat loomed in the fog out on the water, and a lamppost lit in the streets. I walked down the road and came across alleyways. Graffiti covered some of the walls. Strange, multicolored eyes staring out at me. Then I heard a noise, and the screen flashed quickly. I turned around. Just behind me, a man appeared. He was wearing a gray hat and a long trench coat. He was walking slowly towards me, almost gliding across the ground. I tried to walk backwards to get away, but my controller wasn't responding. He was just getting closer. For a split second, 2 red dots glared out from under his hat. Then the screen flashed again. This time, I was back in the house, but something had changed. The textures of the walls were replaced with the pictures of real violence, women being raped, children being torn apart, cannibalism, and torture. a Japanese man breaking his own fingers with a hammer. As I moved through the house, the picture slowly began to get worse, and the music began distorting and slowing down. The corridor was longer than it was before, and it was getting darker. I knew that was the end. I knew what was at the end. He was. I moved onwards, the bile rising in my throat, and the fighting urge to vomit. As the pictures began escalating into terrible levels of obscenity and violence, a few steps forward, a man removing a young boy's legs. A few more, a pregnant woman cutting out her own fetus. Further still, a gang of men cut a cow to pieces, wrapping the internal organs around their bodies. Closer to the end, people being forced to eat the corpse of a child, vomiting as I ate their parts. Finally, I reached the end of the corridor. The screen faded to black and a line of text appeared on the screen. www.rrweb.weebly.com/lsdgmn.html. I wrote the link down quickly, and a few seconds later, the game faded to white again and returned to the title screen. This time, the status said, D-Day 00. I tried to choose start again, but the game wouldn't let me continue. I restarted the PS3, and the status went back to a day 1. Before I played it again, I tried the link. It still worked, and a page came up with Japanese writing. Further down the page, there was a picture of the gray man, as he normally appeared. I can't read Japanese, but one of my friends could actually. He lived in Japan for a few years, and he could read and speak the language fluently. I copied the writing down and called him up. After he showed up, I spent the next few hours telling him what had happened. Obviously, he didn't believe me. Who would? But he still agreed to take a look at the writing on the page. Despite several tries, I couldn't get the webpage up again, so I handed him the copy I made. He glanced at it for a few minutes and then suddenly turned pale. He handed it back to me and sat down on the couch. He said nothing for a good 5 minutes. Then he told me what it said. If you are reading this, well done. You have seen the man as he is. What he did to me as I slept, as I dreamed his dark nightmare. You have also seen it. Those violent images were him. He had no form, only the dream man. He caused all this. Those events in the images, he took those innocents and possessed them. He made them do it. He made me make that game. Gray, 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 gray. As he finished, he stood out, grabbed his coat, and said, "Whatever you saw in that game, don't tell me anything about it." And then he left. The next week, he went back to Japan. I couldn't touch another console after that. I destroyed my PS3 and replaced my computer. A few weeks after he left for Japan, I got a call. He had killed a woman, then committed suicide. The woman who he killed, Osamu Sato, was the lead designer on LSD. If you guys are wondering, the game does actually exist, but it isn't nearly as violent.